Brilliant. All right. So, deterioration of US political norms. So, what has happened? Well, we had a parade on the president's birthday, which was, shall we say, underwhelming. If you have seen parades in other parts of the world, the marching wasn't that great. Glenn, you've got to up your game there.
I'll get to that in a moment.
And we've seen a lot of trouble in Los Angeles. We have, for years, the US was synonymous with rule of law, stable institutions, stability and certainty. That's why a lot of immigrants flocked here. That's why businesses invested here. And the policy environment make US an attractive place to immigrate, a fantastic place to do business. And now, a lot of our feckless European friends representing various countries in the diplomatic corps tell us that Washington, D.C. increasingly resembles capitals of developing countries. They see a style of governing where people matter more than institutions and loyalty matters more than competence. We've seen attacks on universities, which, to be fair, are run by woke totalitarians. But you have, as we were discussing before this event, you have authoritarians on the right and totalitarians on the left these days, and we seem to be living in a curious time. We've gone back to the days of the religious wars in Europe, it seems. But on a serious note, we are talking about serious matters. On a pertinent note, there's a clash now between Harvard and the US government. Now, US soft power rests on Harvard and Hollywood, really. So this is a biggie. Of course, Harvard has an endowment of over 53 billion people. You're a Harvard man. You are now only behind the Catholic and Mormon churches in net worth. Excellent. 27% of Harvard students are foreigners.
Between Bloomberg, who must have given something to Harvard, or I don't know, she's your wealthy person, and we've given 53 billion and $5.
Excellent. And about 27% of Harvard students are foreigners, and many of them coming from the world's wealthiest and most powerful families, whilst others happening to be some of the best and brightest students in the world. Now they're in a protracted legal battle. Apparently, Harvard cannot admit any foreign students. So good luck to all the Indians who dream of Harvard, all the parents, grandparents, aunts, uncle, nieces, and other people from around the world. Also, not just Harvard, we've had a major clash over immigration. ICE officials, immigration and customs enforcement officials, have been told to do all in their power to achieve the very important goal of delivering the single largest mass deportation program in history. These are words of the great president, your great leader, President Donald Trump. The court hearings and legal procedures typically required by law now appear to be quite regularly ignored. There are lots of protests, and in the protests, people have been waving flags of Mexico, which hasn't obviously gone down well with many Americans. The National Guard is out. I don't think Governor Gavin Newsom was consulted. I think both California Governor Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump are locked in a legal battle as well as a verbal battle. Apart from National Guards, apparently 800 Marines were also deployed, which is relatively rare in US political history. So, and of course, the very day we had the parade, we also had the No Kings protests around America. So over to you, Glenn. What does this,
if I may, you touch upon
mean?
Not to be dismissive at all, but you have pointed out to us sort of the froth of what is happening, which we all see, because those are the shiny objects that are moving and so on, to mix my metaphors. But what's happening is historically significant and alarming. in United States society and politics. I have said in virtually every interview I've done for the past 10 years, the United States is facing the greatest crisis to its culture, society, I say, and institutions, meaning government, since 1861 at the least. And I would argue even worse as a threat, because then in our Civil War 150 years ago, 175 years ago, the nation split in half, but its institutions were not challenged by those who were under its jurisdiction, nor its theoretical objectives and ideals. All of that is the case today. Why are the points that you mentioned significant? Calling out the National Guard the way it was done is a nearly revolutionary step, more in the guise of a top-down putsch than bottom-up, of course, because the federal government may only nationalize the National Guard. And I can't quote you the law, but it may only do so in a grave national emergency. All observers said, from the mayor to the police to the governor in California, that in a city of X thousands of square miles, there were 4 blocks or something to that effect that were being affected by the demonstrations. There was no crisis, despite what Fox News said, that would justify centralizing the power of the military in the chief executive entirely. That's only been done once since, I think, the Civil War, or perhaps since World War I forget. And that was in 1967 during terrible riots over civil rights and racial tensions, the assassination of, it was just before the assassination of Martin Luther King. So that's one thing. The second is, what is the theoretical objective, the construct that is guiding the policies being implemented by the Trump administration? There are 2 things. I'm sure I've spoken of them before. One is the theory of the unitary executive. Sounds abstruse. It's critically important for this. And the other is embodied in contemporary politics by this Project 2025. What is the objective of Project 2025? I've mentioned this before. A classmate of mine at Harvard named Grover Norquist has devoted his life. He's one of the fathers of the objective, which is that this will sound insane, I think, frankly, but it is not. It is sincerely pursued. The objective is that the federal government should only have 2 functions. One is border control, and 2 is national defense. Only 2 functions. Social services, welfare, equal opportunity programs, no other function. Research on medicines should be the purview or pursued by the federal government. So to achieve that, you should reduce the size and the budget of the federal government by 50%. Think of DOGE and what it was theoretically trying to achieve. The second thing is this theory of unitary executive. This comes out of the neoconservatives. I've mentioned this before. It always sounds outlandish. It is literally the case. The theoretical father of the theory of the unitary executive is Carl Schmitt, who was Adolf Hitler's lawyer. And the belief is that the American system of government is inefficient, inappropriate for world power, and we have to change it so that the executive can actually wield power the way Xi Jinping does. I will build a highway here, and eminent domain is not even necessary because we simply seize stuff. We don't have to compensate, whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that may be coherent and it may be correct that the American government by design and practice is inefficient and not well suited to the role of a global power or even to manage itself. But that is literally also revolutionary in intent. So then there's the third component, which is not institutional, and that is cultural, which is that only Americans who look like me and Stephen Schleicher and Peter Isaacson, culturally, although this would be denied with, as the French say, at the end of one's lips, du bout de lèvres, really get to decide what the cultural norms and practices and then structures of the American society and government are. And that is the agenda, which is why Harvard figures into this. Harvard is the icon of the effete intellectual, cosmopolitan, international, multicultural America, which is the antithesis of all of the things, the objectives and the definitions of what it is to be American that I just described. And so it's both a straw man and an icon, not both. It's a straw man and an icon and an easy target to show the base of the MAGA movement that we are standing up for real America, not these people who speak foreign languages and lift their pinkies when they sip tea. Uh, and so you can deride these things and make
and
jokes
there
about
is
them, just as the critics, frankly, of Adolf Hitler did, saying, who would believe any of this stuff? Of course, we can handle people who are so simple-minded, until they were all put into the gas chamber. And so I'm not saying there's going to be a gas chamber in America, but what is happening is a direct conscious attack to undermine and to shift the foundations of the American governmental structure and the nature of American society. And it is hugely consequential what is happening, even though the courts, time after time after time, will shoot down the specific objectives by changing the nature of the debates and the fights. The whole paradigm and bell curve of what's acceptable and not, and what is practice and what is America, is shifting.
So, I mean, yes, point taken. But let's look at some of the criticisms of the American state. We've both agreed that there has been a thickening of processes. Today, to start a small business, a restaurant, the number of permissions you need is insane. And in a way, regulation has become a barrier to entry for smaller businesses. We've also seen, and I'm not saying that Donald Trump is addressing this issue, we've also seen an extraordinary concentration of power in a few companies. The mergers and acquisitions that have happened over the last few decades are completely opposite to what Teddy Roosevelt achieved with his trust busting. He created a competitive economy by breaking up big oil and destroying the power of the big companies.
Well, so that's actually the apotheosis of the deregulated state. I'm sure Peter would agree with me on that. The people, this movement is deriding what it has actually made possible. And your issue on the deregulation, this is a classic conservative Republican complaint about the American system.
You need some balance. That's all I'm saying.
That's not the same thing as a
revolution.
No,
it's not the same thing. But what I'm saying is it is responding to strains and stresses in society. You have a mayoral candidate in New York who at the same time says he's Shia Islam, and at the same time it is LGBTQ+1. And come on, if you're LGBTQ+1 or whatever in Iran, you're pretty much dead. Women can't even uncover their hair. And, this extraordinary lack of coherence when it comes to the Democratic Party to respond to the massive challenges that the US is facing. And economically, there has been a hollowing out of the working class. There is a cost of living crisis. The cost of education is ridiculously high. Harvard does have a very chilling effect on free speech. You and I are not welcome there because we are both racist. We are classist. I mean, you're a WASP who worked in the CIA. I'm a Rajput. I'm a feudal lord. We are not welcome. So, what I'm not defending the theory of unitary power. What I'm saying is that these movements emerge when there are great fault lines in society, great fault lines in political institutions, and great fault lines in the economy. When there are a lot of people who have lost a lot, they don't feel compensated. When the elites have become effete, the simple-minded man who has a quick answer to a complex question is the savior. I mean, you could argue.
Yeah, your description of the ills of the ruling elite, which the MAGA movement is opposing, are accurate. But I also think strongly that they are superficial to the fundamental issue, which is that no group which has power. I think in history, whether it's a state or a faction within society, has willingly surrendered its power. And the people who look like me, the WASP, the white male elite, is no longer, I think, literally a majority in the country. And power has clearly shifted. And whatever the there have been or are in these shifts culturally, politically, institutionally, with regard to regulation and so on, the fundamental point is one of culture, race, and power. And the erstwhile haves, even if they were poor, struggling coal miners in West Virginia, they were still part of the dominant paradigm culturally and institutionally, um, are unwilling to have people whose name ends in a vowel or who don't have the same pigmentation as I um, become the power majority. That's
Yes.
fundamentally it.
Yes, there is an element of truth, and that will play out even worse in Europe, because in Europe there's a religious divide, and Europe went through religious wars from 1618 to 1648, the 30 Years' War. But I think that is again one, but not the only thing. Social media has exacerbated division. People
Mm-hmm.
live off misinformation and disinformation. Everyone ends up in echo chambers through filter bubbles. We are also seeing a destruction of critical thought, as Peter Isaacson points out repeatedly, and I agree with him. You don't have critical thinking from an early age. You said it, that we are going from the written word to, again, pictures. The miracle in morality, please. A massive drop in literacy, a massive drop in critical thinking. So all of that, and in the backdrop, we've seen a decline of institutions, including political parties and the press. In 1998, for every job in journalism, for every one job in journalism, there were, let's say, 1.9, say 2 jobs in public relations. Today, that number is 1:10. So all you're getting is spin, 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 public relations. So how can you have a democracy? Just let me finish the point. How can you have a representative democracy when a citizenry is not informed and not educated?
Well, it's the apotheosis of de Tocqueville's analysis of American society, or rather of democracy, which is when all voices are equal, then no voice is an authority, and then a fool has as much wisdom as a sage, and you find yourself in chaos.
On that happy note,
and the tyranny of the majority.
And the tyranny of the majority. On that happy note, ladies and gentlemen, it's been lovely to have you here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you sign up for the FO exclusive. We do this live every month. We take questions. We try our best to make sense of the world. And it's bye for now from me and Glenn.
Goodbye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.